Okay, so we're here to talk about late-stage deed servicing panel, and, I'm sorry, late-stage deed servicing, and on the panel is Jeff Frantz, Adam Greenberg, and Tiffany Cone, and I'm going to allow them each to take a moment to introduce themselves, and I'll start with you, Adam.
My name is Adam Greenberg. I'm an attorney in New Jersey. I've been handling taxing matters for over 20 years. Some of you are familiar with me, so you'll hear some of the stories from doing that kind of stuff. So,
my name's Tiffany Cone. I'm with a company called REO America. We're a servicing company based out of Orlando, Florida.
And Jeff Frantz, started with MTech Services, managing their REO and foreclosures. Now working with tax title services, doing title certifications for tax deeds.
And we want to make this interactive as well. We have put together some questions for the panel, but please feel free to ask a question as we go along. You don't need to wait to the end to interject your question here. So, Adam, I'm going to start with you on this one. As an investor, what do you do with walkaway properties leading to the blight in the neighborhoods?
well, the first thing I tell clients is don't be afraid to walk away. Sometimes it's the best move. Sometimes clients really want to push it to the end or even take title, and then they find out they're way underwater. I had one property where the town wanted to hit them with a $1,500 fine for the property's condition, and then they said, we're going to hit you for 90 days in a row. And I told the client, why did you even take this property? So when it comes to walkaways, you got to look at it at the exit strategy. You know, you get on the plane and they tell you 2 exits back there, 2 exits here. If you don't have it at the beginning, you're going to have a real problem with that. So don't be afraid to walk away. Another thing I've done, especially with the city of Camden, which is tough, and in some cases the subsequent taxes are so high it's not worth it. We've actually said to the city, we'll give this to you. And we give them the property instead of them doing a tax foreclosure themselves. So we get our liability off the hook, we don't get hit with code violations, and the city doesn't have to pay for an in-rem foreclosure themselves. So.
Excellent. And do you have some comments on that as well, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Adam. It's, try not to get it into the situation in the first place where you have to walk away. I think as an industry, though, I mean, we have a responsibility that if we walk away from the property, it goes back to the delinquent tax roll and it just sits there. And really, areas like Baltimore, you see some of the blighted neighborhoods that are there, and it's probably because of the way the tax law is structured there. So with the NTLA, and I think us as a community, I think we need to work with the different localities and their statutes and find ways to, maybe not have situations where we have to walk away from the properties.
And Jeff, I'll stay with you. How do you, as an investor, deal with the homeowners association and the condo fees and association fees there?
Yeah, so homeowners associations, condo associations, Florida is probably where I've dealt with that the most. I think talking to them early on in the process is important, explaining who you are. Most of them haven't dealt with tax lien, tax deed investors. So getting on the phone and figuring out what you owe. But most of the time they have no clue, and they have no clue of what we actually owe. So knowing the statute's cold so that you can counter any argument they have, I think it's important.
Adam, any thoughts on that as well?
No, when he says knowing the statute's cold, it's these condo associations, they don't know their own laws, let alone tax lien laws. So last week I had one, they wanted a $19,000 payoff for the condo fees. I said, wait a minute, we just took title in September. We owe you 2 months. They're like, oh, sorry. So 19,000 went to 400. So it's
A lot of times it's explaining it to them in the foreclosure. If you notice the HOA, then it usually extinguishes liens prior to your title. You only owe your title. But most of the time the HOAs don't know that. You have to educate them and explain it.
and they don't like it.
I was just going to say, are they open to that at all? I don't know. And then what can we do or what can you guys do, or we as an industry do, to better ensure marketable title?
That's a tough call. I mean, in Jersey, we notice everybody, you do everything right, and in the end, you get a judge who sometimes wants to give it back anyway. One of my favorite cases is the judge wrote that the New Jersey tax foreclosure law is Dickinsonian, ignoring the fact it should be Dickensian. She says Dickinsonian, which tells you one thing. And then she says, not only is it Dickinsonian, but courts of equity have to do what they can to alleviate the harsh effects of the law. And I look at it and say, wait a minute, you took an oath to uphold the law, and you're telling me that it's your job to get around the law? So it's difficult. You have to educate the judges and point out, you realize, like I have one now, I said to the judge, It's $112,000 in taxes. That would pay for 3 cops on the street this year. And then the judge kind of looks at it and says, ooh, good point. So,
And what would you say, Tiffany, are some recommendations for occupied properties?
Communication. It's the biggest key. Communicate early, communicate often, and communicate peacefully, and give them options. A lot of times, they're looking to us for options. So if you give them, cash for keys, or sometimes if you put a down payment on moving expenses or an apartment, give them options for vacating and vacating peacefully.
Adam, you look like the wheels are turning, and you must have a story here.
well, no, I would say you treat them with respect and sympathy because, the old saying is you don't get your barber mad while you're sitting in the chair, because they can do some bad things.
Right.
They can.
And former homeowners, they'll steal the copper, they'll steal the hot water heater. Sometimes they take the pipes without turning the water off.
Right.
So, because it's your fault they didn't pay their taxes.
Right.
So, but you look, they're in a tough situation. So, if you don't treat them with respect or sympathy, then they'll treat you back with contempt.
Right, right.
And just to survive, that's been my experience too. Just looking back, every good situation I've had with a occupant is because I reached out or our staff reached out and talked to them. Usually talked to them multiple times, and then every situation which turned out not so good, we just couldn't reach them, and maybe they just buried their head in the sand. But really looking back, I think I should have, or we should have been more aggressive in reaching out to them, knocking on the doors, getting our agents over there, and just figuring out what their situation is. As soon as they start talking, there's a solution there. But if they don't talk to you, there's not a solution.
Excellent point. Tiffany, I'm going back to you. What do you do with demolition properties?
Sell them.
As quickly as possible.
Right.
And how do you specifically go about selling them? What do you do?
They're just like other properties, except they have a demo lien. So we've been successful with working with the counties and the cities to lower their demo lien, or a lot of times we'll sell to local buyers and investors because as a local, they can negotiate a lot more than an outside company. So there's not much you can do except for sell them.
Okay. And what do you, Adam, advise your clients to do?
The first thing is never let the government demolish it, because they'll put it out to public bid. I had one in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. They wanted $35,000 to demolish it. My client paid $9,000 to get it demolished. If you let them do it, it'll be 10 times what the reasonable value will be. So if you can work with the towns.
Before.
Yeah, definitely, obviously before, but it's, never let the government put it out to bid.
And Jeff, do you
question.
run?
I have a question.
Oh,
Do you use normal marketing channels for these properties that have a demo lien or need a little bit of massaging? Do you use normal market channels, or do you try to direct market to?
We do a lot of old style marketing with those types of properties because they are lower end. They have the liens, putting a sign in the yard, talking to neighbors. A lot of times you can sell to the neighbors. It's a vacant lot that they can add to their property.
We've done the neighbor thing a lot.
Right.
And everybody wants a bigger yard, so if
Right.
it's in a normal neighborhood,
That's-
they're willing to give you $1,000 for it, $500, whatever you can, and the lien
Make
just stays there.
payments. Right, exactly.
I've also seen where folks have put manufactured homes or mobile homes on there, and now it generates income. You don't have to pay the demo lien off until you sell the property. So, it's just the demo lien will sit there, you earn income from the mobile home, and you're good to go.
But assuming there's something salvageable there still.
That's
kind of
right.
thing,
I mean, my clients sometimes they'll list it with a realtor through the MLS, but at the same time, many of them have their own sets of contacts, what we call dirty buyers, people that want this stuff. Because if you don't have a contractor and to know how to get it done, you're just going to be underwater. So.
Right.
Excellent. Any other questions on while we're in this area? Okay. All righty. I'm going to go to Jeff. I'm going to go to you on this one. How does one evaluate a late-stage tax lien portfolio for a disposition strategy?
Yeah, so, I think, especially if you're a servicer or you're managing a large portfolio, setting up milestones with your servicer to say, hey, 2 months before we're going to foreclose or 2 months before it's going to go to deed, let's look at this property, get inspections, because the property's changed after a year, it may be demoed like we talked about before. You have to do it late enough because a lot of the liens are redeemed. You don't want to waste money on the inspections, but getting another visual before you make the decision to foreclose or get the deed is It's really important.
And I would suspect that not every situation is it going to be vacant land. You're going to have a structure on there, a house on there. So do you guys order BPOs and valuations on those, or what do you do?
So it depends. In overbid states, we'll typically recommend, and I've seen ordering BPOs because you have a lot of money at stake and you're already buying this at 50 to 75% LTVs. For your non-overbid states, we found just drive-bys work really well, and as long as it probably doesn't look like it's going to have a ton of liens on it, you should be okay and able to take the deed. The main situation we found is that when you do the drive-by and the grass isn't cut and there's broken windows, you may have a serious lien on there. Or of a commercial property, I've seen it where we've had serious EPA environmental liens, which just can kill your portfolio if you take deed to it.
Yeah, never take title in the fund. Try to get an REO entity to put it into. If you have to, get a single purpose entity for it. Because if you get hit, one of the famous cases in New Jersey, the guy had a daycare center, used to be a thermometer factory.
Oh,
So it was
dear.
contaminated with mercury.
Oh, no.
He got hit with a $2 million judgment. You take a fund where you make $1,000, $2,000 per lien, and you've just bankrupted the fund for a long time to come. So it's.
And as we were preparing for the panel last week, you mentioned you advise your clients to set up multiple entities to handle these REO properties.
Yeah, if possible. I mean, it depends on your ability to do it, because sometimes it's not feasible financially, but, sooner or later, someone's going to slip and fall on one of the properties, and you might get sued. So I had one client, I think he has 5 different LLCs. He'll put a bunch into one for a period of time, and then as he sells them, he puts the next ones into the next LLC. And he'll just keep rolling them like that over time. So.
And you should.
found that a single-purpose LLC for a environmentally sensitive property is sufficient to shield yourself and others, or not necessarily?
The problem with that, there's no guarantee. I mean, it's done well in some cases. It depends how hard they want to dig and try to get you and what they want to allege. The good thing is with tax liens, even though you're not immune from liability because you didn't cause the contamination, but in the same right, equitably, you look at a judge and say, wait a minute, judge, I didn't do anything here. I just own it. So they'll look at it and say, yeah, okay, your entity is liable, but they're not going to go pierce the corporate veil because you're not the one who poured out whatever substance it was there.
It's just the EPA is very aggressive when they see a large fund with a lot of assets behind it
Oh, I bet.
going after you for that property. We had one, it was same situation, an old dry cleaner. It's like a $2 million cleanup. We were lucky not to get the deed to it, but had we taken it, that entire portfolio would have been out to lunch.
You can't eliminate risk. You got to just try to minimize it.
If you
Yes.
get that property into a single-purpose corporation or LLC or whatever, you usually have to take the deed, which passes it through you to get it there. Is there a way around that?
It depends on the state, I think. You can assign the liens, and in some states, you can assign your lien, so you can do it prior to taking deed.
Yeah,
So-
in New Jersey, we do an assignment of the lien, and we have to do a motion to substitute the plaintiff. And then you take the deed in the name of that new entity.
Right.
So I've seen it where if you have industrial properties you have liens on, do the assignment before you foreclose, before you get the deed, if you can structurally. And that way you won't have to worry about it and accidentally have the deed issued to you, which happens, in say Florida, where, the county is just doing all the noticing.
Have you all had experience with setting up series LLCs?
What do you mean in terms of series?
I don't know if it's in every state. It started out in Delaware and spread to some of the others. But what you have is you set up a main LLC, and then out of that you can make series that aren't separately registered and have the
Right, subsidiaries, so.
separate liability shields.
Yeah, I've had clients do it. It tends to work as long as your bookkeeping's correct. You can't be commingling all the accounts together. You actually have to follow corporate formalities. So it can work. What I've also told clients sometimes, especially with really concerning properties, is if you're going to do it, don't name it after your own fund. Name it something where if somebody looks at it, they're not exactly sure that it's you.
Right.
You're not committing a fraud, but don't be raising a big arrow saying, hey, come to me. So you want to protect your assets by keeping people away.
Was there another question? No, yep.
You had clients use Wyoming and Nevada entities where it's legal to use nominee officers to hide the true ownership of those entities?
I haven't.
I haven't
No.
either.
I mean, most in the industry here, I mean, we're not really trying to hide ownership of that. So it's really just goes back to don't make bad mistakes
Right.
and plan early on it.
I don't like making it easy for people to come after my clients. I mean, I've never tried to hide the ownership, but again, you know, if you're the ABC fund, you don't make it the ABC REO company. So
ABC 1, ABC
Right.
2.
exactly.
Anybody else? Okay. Tiffany, what are some of the best exit strategies for properties underwater financially or occupied or in slow-moving markets? Those.
I think if the properties are 100% property dependent. I mean, it really depends on where they're located, what the local market is how you put your exit strategy together. You have to make sure you're vetting all the strategies possible to maximize your return and your recoveries. Sometimes you sell the property as is, sometimes you renovate it, sometimes you hold it as a rental. You have to look at each property different. You have to do your research on them, look at the local, what's trending, if things are selling as is or renovated.
I always love the clients with pie charts and graphs showing the redemption curves. And I tell them, look, well, this is REO. This property is what it is. It's either a 2-bedroom, a 5-bedroom, it's commercial. It is by what it is.
That's correct.
So, you know, you got to sell it for what it is to whomever will buy it. You can't generalize in that regard.
And every area is different, every state's different. I mean, Baltimore, for example, you can have one block that sells very well and is occupied, the next block over, it's all vacant. So every exit strategy depends on the property.
And I think a good one that's gaining more popularity in the industry is online auctions and auctioning the properties. You know, you look at the mortgage market and the default market there, and you've seen this. That's one of their go-tos, is just throw it into an auction. And nowadays, there's a lot of investors out there, and they're bidding up these properties, sometimes more than market value. So I would say, don't be afraid of looking at that option and putting it into an auction. You can always do a reserve bid, but it's a good way to get rid of some of these properties.
Yeah, and be smart with your realtors too. You know, for example, I mean, whatever state you're in, if you're in Miami, but you have a property in Pensacola, you don't want to be using a Miami realtor just because he's a broker there. You want to get someone local who knows
Right.
who might buy the place. So it's too many people say, oh, this is my realtor for New Jersey. Well, that doesn't help you because they have no idea the difference between two different towns.
Right. Okay, what can the tax lien industry do to speed up the time from the tax deed issuance, foreclosure to final disposition of the property? Tiffany, I'm going to start with you on this one. What are some of the strategies that you use?
To speed it up, on our side, it's really due diligence. It's looking at the portfolio, breaking it down, and pushing the foreclosures through. It's hard to give an attorney 500 properties and say, here, foreclose, have fun. So it's really breaking them down, looking at them, which ones you're going to target first, and doing your due diligence on them. You can't eat the elephant all at once. Right. You have to break it down.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think going back to the mortgage industry, you know, they're much more developed on the default side, and they're having metrics for their asset managers in terms of hours and their agents in terms of hours in their systems, where I think in our industry it's months sometimes. So trying to lower that cycle and speed it up a little bit. Interesting. Last month I had an asset manager, and she was asking me about getting BPOs on a portfolio, and you know, she wanted to save $10, and she was calling around trying to find an agent. Took her 2 days to find a good agent that would do all these BPOs for her for $10 less. And you know, a week and a half later, the agent doesn't call back because he realized what type of properties they were. So you know, she spent a week and a half out of her life just to save $10 a BPO. So you know, don't be pound foolish and penny wise, right? It's pound wise and penny foolish.
Time can be your enemy. You
Yeah,
have to be fast with them.
I was about to say older's not better when it comes to liens or property. So in New Jersey, you can foreclose after 24 months, but it's good for 20 years. You know, the longer you wait, the worse that property gets. People die, the title gets to be worse. So, you know, a lot of times I find now we start foreclosing at 24 months. Yeah, the redemptions come in a lot faster. But when you get the properties, you're getting it for 2 years worth of taxes, not 5 years worth of taxes. So you've made more money on the ones that won't redeem.
Very good. Any questions on any of part of that? Do you have a system of record, any of you guys, that you use to manage the workflow for these assets? Just
We
out of
do, we
curiosity.
have an internal
System
system that we
proprietary.
created, website-based,
Okay.
that
What
we
about you,
track.
You know, we had a system when I was working as an asset manager that was pretty good, but I think, you know, we could always improve that.
Yes, and I have the remedy for that, so we'll
Yes.
talk later.
Yes.
That's where I get to put my plug in there. Okay, so moving on here. Okay, what are the folks doing, and this came from a prior conversation that I posed to the panel when we were prepping for this, so it came from somebody in the audience. What are folks doing about cross-attachment of liens in Florida? And then I was told that that actually happens nationwide. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to start off this
Yeah, so
conversation.
the issue really is
Well,
for,
let's define cross-attachment.
sure, so if you have a lien on a property in your name in the same county, that lien will affect your other properties when you go to try to sell it. So when you run your title report, they do a search of the owner name. And if you have a lien, they're going to put that onto the sale of your property because you have to pay it off. So for us, it's not really an issue unless you have a large portfolio in one county and you haven't done something with the property. So the perfect example is you have a vacant lot, you can't sell it, it sits in your portfolio for 2 years, all your other REO and tax deeds are in the same entity. Well, lo and behold, you know, they put all these fines onto this one lot that you haven't touched. You go to sell the really nice property for $100,000 and you may have $20,000 worth of liens because of the other property in the county that's attached to this property. So it goes to, I think we talked about trying to set up special
Right, the different
LLCs
funds.
for that.
And knowing the areas, I think that really do that. Like, we have, I want to say about 500 Florida properties that just came in, and I have not run into that in Florida. But I have in West Virginia, and you know the county, you know the area and the city, and you do your best to put them in different names then.
Did you?
Yeah, we don't have that in New Jersey, but certainly start moving it around, get it into a separate entity. So it's,
Okay. And then what else, what other ideas can we share with our audience here to, you know, save or help them save money or make money on these investments?
what I tell people is inquiry, you know, figure out, you know, I remember when I first started, people had the newspaper with a list of tax liens, and they were bidding off whatever they saw.
They still do that in states.
Some of them do it, but a lot of them now come in with this, with the laptops, and they have the spreadsheets and the
They do.
data they've picked up from the various vendors. They know what it's assessed at. They might have pictures, but there's a risk tolerance. So some of them say, look, anything over $5,000, we're driving it before we bid it. So you've got to figure out what your risk tolerance is. In New Jersey, the Environmental Protection Department is online. So you could look at the known environmental sites so you're not buying into something really nasty. You got to figure, like Google Maps doesn't help because it's dated, it's 2 years old. That house could have been burned down. So what I tell people is go in with your eyes open because you have no idea what's there. So it's, and again, if you pay a $100 lien and you look at the property and it's crap, you can throw out the lien and not risk a lot of money. So it's,
Any other comments on that?
I guess just looking back and managing portfolios, realizing time is probably your most precious commodity and probably most expensive commodity, especially if you have multiple asset managers managing your liens and REO. So kind of going back to the example of the asset manager trying to save $10 on a BPO, don't be afraid to outsource. Don't be afraid of setting up systems that you can get through all these different steps in managing your portfolio. It'll save you dollars in the long run, even though it may not look like that on paper.
Right.
Sometimes you can partner with different companies, like he said, to outsource. Like for us, we're a servicer, so that's what we specialize in. So sometimes it's good, instead of learning on your own, you partner with someone who has the experience
That's
there.
right. That's right. We are wrapped up with our portion. What questions might you have for us? Them? No other questions? Okay, you can roll in the bar now. We're all set. Okay, thank you.